And if you would be able, that's how some explain. If you would be able to handle everything and touch and move everything on Shabbat, then the day of Shabbat will be very much like a regular, ordinary day of the week. The fact that you can't, that you're limited on what you can handle on Shabbat, will open up and free you to rest up, to be a much more day of rest on the Shabbat. That's one idea of Mukseh. Another idea of Mukseh, that if you would handle everything on Shabbat, if you move everything on Shabbat, there's a concern that you might come to carry outside on Shabbat, right? Carrying on Shabbat is morning, Ralph.
Morning, Rabbi.
We're trying to get a little. Oh, here we're coming. We get ready. Carrying on Shabbat is a big deal, and the big, carrying to a place where you can't carry, especially if you carry. Especially if you carry to public property, right? One of the third malachot on Shabbat is carrying to public property, right? And it's a Torah violation of Shabbat. And being that's the case, a person, if you would handle everything, then there's a concern you might come to carry on Shabbat out into the street. Right? These are some of the issues. Morning. Morning, Ralph. Good to see you.
How are you, Rabbi?
Good to thank God. We were saying, I hope you're doing well. We were saying that on Shabbat, the rabbis instituted something called mukseh. Mukseh is that something wasn't prepared before Shabbat for use, so to speak. You can't go ahead and, meaning, let's say money is not prepared for use, or but you have no use for money on Shabbat, or let's say rocks that are on the ground, they don't have really use for you, So therefore, those items, they're not prepared for use. They're like mukseh. They're set aside. They were separated from you from before Shabbat. They were set aside not to be used. Now the Gemara introduced something else called nolad. Nolad is when an item was set aside for one type of use, and then now, if it became it's that use is not here anymore, or if that something new was here, or something that wasn't here at all beforehand, and now became something that wasn't set for Shabbat, and now just was born. So that's the issue of nolad, and that's the issue of mukseh. Now, so comes the Gemara on 29a1 and goes back to the point that we mentioned earlier. Rav Yehuda Rav. We mentioned the name of Rav. Masikin, you have it on the right, the last paragraph on 29a1 on the right. Masikin b'kelim, ve'ein masikin b'shivri kelim. We said that you could go ahead and fuel a fire if you need fuel from using a utensil. Let's say you have a wooden utensil. You can actually use it as firewood. Now, obviously, there's something called bal tashchit that we learned in last week's parsha. You can't waste. So obviously, we're talking about a situation where you don't have other means of fuel for your fire. So you could go ahead and use a utensil. Because there is something called bal tashchit. You can't waste. But let's say something that broke on Yom Tov, you can't use a broken utensil on Yom Tov to feed the fire, because that was nolad. It was born today. It wasn't here before when Yom Tov entered. It wasn't here. It wasn't here as a broken item. It was there as a full item. Now its identity has changed. It's broken. And you can't use that as, if it broke on Yom Tov, you can't use that to fuel your fire. Divi Rabbi Yehuda. That's the words of Rabbi Yehuda. And I think we even said also, if you have glass that broke on Shabbat, the glass has no use. I mean, there is another point. It's not only nolad, You see, nolad, there I have no use of glass that's broken. What am I doing with broken glass? Why am I allowed to move glass? Because of danger,
Uh-huh.
right? But really, it should be mukseh. It's something that has no use. Does broken glass, Simon, have any use? It doesn't have any use, broken glass, right? I mean, are you going to use broken glass for something?
I'm going to use it.
Maybe there might be people in the world that they will recycle the glass, but it's not for me and for me, the common person. It's not used. We don't use. We throw out. We discard broken glass, right? So it has no use, but we're allowed to move it because of danger. But here is an interesting point. I have use for this broken wooden utensil. It's not that it has no use. I would want to use it as firewood, but it's no lot. It's in a new state. It's not in a state that it was before. It's in a total new state. It wasn't prepared to be. Uh, it wasn't at this state beforehand. So therefore, it is considered. It is mukseh. Good morning, Asaf. Reb Shimon Matir. Reb Shimon says it's not a. It's not a problem. He holds there's no prohibition of mukseh regarding nolad. If the item was usable before Yom Tov, and now it's usable on Yom Tov, even if it's usually in a total different fashion, it's new, it's a new item. It wasn't that type of item before the holiday, but he says it's still permitted. That you have a use for it, you could use it. Then the Gemara continues. Rav brings two additional situations. Masikim bitmorim. Let's say you have a date. The date has a nice, dates have some figs, it has some pits in the dates. Um, but right, so here we have some pits in the date. So, and if let's say you want to use the date as fuel, the date with the food on it, again you have to say that we're talking about you have no other fuel. Because if you have other fuel, you're wasting food by using this as fuel. Go use some oil as fuel. Don't waste food. But if you have no other item, you want to go ahead and take this food on Yom Tov and throw it into the fire to help fuel the fire. Take this date. So it says masikin. You're allowed to go and do that. But achlan, if you ate the date and you're only left with the pit, im masikin bigarnehem. You can't use the pit.
I don't comprehend. Why would they even think of throwing food into the fire to fuel the fire? I mean,
Whoever do that, right?
Whoever do that.
Right. Meaning,
I mean, not even the poor people that they don't have food and they're going to put it in the fire. What
right,
makes sense?
right. So,
Not that they.
so Simon,
Well,
I think you're used to our society that we have electricity, but if we live in
even then, that's a side.
right,
Why would you
right,
put food in the
right,
fire?
but let's say it's a cold winter night, or it's Yom Tov. You thought you had enough. It's Yom Tov, right? And you thought that you cut enough wood before the holiday to fuel your fire, right? Wood. You know, you thought you had enough wood before the holiday, but then it comes out. You're in your house and you don't have wood. You ran out of wood. What do you do? I got these old dates. So I have and the date has a nice pit inside the date. A little small. I can't. You know what I need? I need a little fire. I want to read on the Yom Tov, right? So let's say I want to read on the Yom Tov. I need a small little fire for me to read that, right? That can last a small. How much light do I need?
Will not even catch fire.
Say it again.
But those spit will not even catch a fire. I don't know.
But
Like a fantasy.
yeah, but it seems like this pit would this date would
That is different date.
also the date again. Maybe once the outside of the date becomes, and it's mixing together with other. Let's say there's other. You might have some other fuel there, and this is just or other pieces of wood, but this is helping the fire go. So masikin So the first opinion says, Ema sikin begarin. If once you ate it and you're left with the pit, Ema sikin begarineim. You can't go ahead and use the pit as fuel because that no, Rabbi Yehuda, that's no lad. The pit is considered something new, meaning to say, as uh, as long as you had food on the pit, right? So the pit was there serving the food. So the pit and the date are considered one in a sense. It's not mukseh, but once you ate the food from the pit, now what do you got left? You got a pit. You got right in a certain sense. You don't have a food anymore. You got a pit. So Rabbi Yehuda says you can't use the pit for fuel. However, Rabbi Shimon Matir. Rabbi Shimon says you could use the pit. He holds there's no problem of no lad. Now, case 3 is masikin begozim. Now you are turning the page. You already turned the page. You're on 2982. Now you talk 28.2. Now masikin begozim. So you got a walnut. Right, a walnut has a nice shell on the outside. You ever see walnuts, everybody? The big nuts, right? So you could use it to, then you could take a walnut. Again, we're talking about a case you have no other fuel. Simon's going to wonder, Rabbi, whoever used nuts that have food in it as fuel, right? This guy, you know what? He sold nuts for a living. He had a lot of extra nuts around the house, and he has no other fuel. So masikin begozim, he could go ahead and use those nuts as fuel. But if he ate the nuts, you can't use the shell of the nuts to be the fuel for the fire. How that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Matir. Rabbi Shimon says you're allowed to go ahead and use it. Now what the Gemara is going to do is the Gemara gave 3 different scenarios, 3 different cases, which Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon argue. One's talking about the nut, one's talking about the eating nuts, one's eating a date, and one's talking about using utensils. The Gemara is not a peddler. A peddler is someone who has all different types of items to sell. He wants to know if you want to buy a nice Manhattan basketball shirt. He wants to sell you a knit shirt, a net shirt. Well, he'll show you all different shirts that he has, right? But the Gemara, the rabbis, they give one case, and you can figure out all the other cases that are similar to that would have the same law. You don't have to give me all different cases that have on the same thing, variations on the same theme. If you could say one case, meaning an apple is a boyer per age, an orange is a boyer per age, and a pear is a boyer per age. I don't have to tell you that I don't have to name apples, oranges, pears. I could just say things that grow from a tree are boyer-per-age, and then you know all the things of a tree. I don't have to list all the apples, orange, pears, and the grapes, right? So why do the rabbis have to argue on these 3 different cases? They're all about nolad. They're all about do we say that something that was here in state 1 when Yom Tov came, then was changed to a different state, as like a new entity? Is that also part of mukseh? That's something that I'm not allowed to move on Yom Tov or not. And I give you 3 different cases, which all seem to be the same idea, which you should be able to learn one from the other. So that's the Gemara's question, Asaf and Ralph and everybody that's here. What do I need all 3 cases? And the Gemara says, Sricha, I need all 3 cases. There's nothing extra, just like there's no extra letter in the Torah. They're not arguing a new case is not, they're not arguing a new case just to show you a new case. It's to show you there's something interesting, new that you might not have known. And I need to tell you all 3, Your Honor, I need to tell you all 3 cases. Each case has a significance for me to tell you. And I would not be able to learn one from the other. That is the point the Gemara is saying. Adam, is it clear? That's the beautiful style of the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Sricha, I need all three cases. By the way, it's such a beautiful picture of Ralph with the Gemara holding it in his hand. The Gemara says, if you tell me the argument in the first case by the utensils, taking a, let's say, a wooden goblet and using it as firewood, but I can't use the broken pieces according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon said you could. Here come Rabbi Yehuda. I would have said over there, Rabbi Yehuda says you can't use the broken utensils. Why? Because it was a very massive change that happened. Originally, you had let's say, a wooden goblet, a wooden plate, and now and now it broke. It's a broken utensil. There's been a great change, and that would be called nolad. It's a new item. It's a total new category. Something that wasn't here before as a broken utensil, and therefore maybe that's what Rabbi Yehuda said you can't use it. However, of a tamarim, a date, the date pit was here before you ate the date pit, and before you ate the date and after you ate the date, the pit was here. It's not, you would identify the date. I have a date with a pit. So now that you ate the date, you might not have looked at the pit as a new entity. It's like, I have something different here, right? It was a pit while it had the food around it. And now also it has the pit. If they ate the food, maybe the pit is not going to be classified as nolad, something new, and therefore come to teach us that yes, we look at the pit. When you take the food off the pit, it's no longer a date. It was a date before, and now it's a pit. When it had the pit in the date, when you had the food on it, we didn't look at the pit was looked at as a date, and now it's a pit, and that's a total new entity. And if you tell me the case of the pit, I would have said, you know why the pit is called nolad, something new? It's because they made Koram Mechasyan. When Yontif came, the pit was covered, right? It was covered by the food around the pit. Now we see the pit. Now that you ate the date, we see the pit. So it's like a new thing here. We didn't see this before. We see it now. Now it's being used as a pit. It's not a food anymore. So that's called nolad. Of klipe gozim, but the case of the shells of a nut, that walnut, right? That walnut shell, I saw the shell before I took out the nut from the walnut, right? You crack open the walnut. The shell was clearly visible beforehand. The Meikara Megalu, right, Simon? Right, Ralph? It was revealed before I knocked open that walnut. Hashim Megalu was revealed all the time. Amishapadami. I might have said that's not called Nolad, that's not called a new entity. And therefore, we come to teach us that it is called Nolad. That walnut, that shell, when you knock open that shell, and now you took out the food. So while the food was in the walnut, that's a walnut. It's not a shell. It's not. It's a food. Now there's a change in the walnut. It went from a food to a non-food. It's garbage, so to speak, or whatever you want to call it. It's wood now. It was a food beforehand. And like one of the commentaries say, before Yom Tov, the shell was attached to the nut with the food inside. The shell was considered like the nut itself, because it guards on the moistness that helps the freshness of the fruit. Like it's interesting how Hashem made the fruit with the shell. The shell protects it, right? What happens when you take a shell off something? Then it starts deteriorating, right? It's amazing. Hashem gave it a protection, a cover and protection, and serves it just like if you take a nectarine or you take an apple. What happens when you take the shell off? When you take the skin off the apple starts get brown. it's going sour. So it's an amazing protection that helps the shelf life. Is that shell? But so, but now that you go ahead and you remove the shell, it's no longer and you took the food out. It's not. We don't look at the shell as part of the food. The shell is just shell. And the same thing with the pit of the date pit, because the date pit keeps the moistness of the date moist, right? Once you take out the pit, then already the date already starts getting older, not as loses its moistness. It gets more hard, right? What happens? You don't have that pit inside that date. You remove that date, gets hard. So that is therefore now. So beforehand, it's serving the pit, the food. It's serving the date. And so when the shell or the pit serves the food that's connected with it, we look at it as all part of the food. But once you remove the food, then it's not a food anymore item. It's already called a shell. Therefore, it's called nolad. But I might have thought that the shell of a nut would not be called newly born because you saw it before, you saw it afterwards. Therefore, it's tzricha. Therefore, I need to tell me that even the shell of a nut is also called nolad. When you cracked open that walnut and you took out the food that's contained inside of it, that beforehand that was a food item, it was a walnut, and now it's a shell, which is not a food item. It's like it became there's a change in the identity of that item. And the Gemara says, "V'hada Rav," that which we stated that Rav brought that the date, if you eat the pit of a date, it has a status of nolad, right? You told me that the date is pit is nolad. The Gemara said, "Lav b'feirishitma." That was not said openly that Rav said that Rabbi Yehuda would hold. Rav said, you see, sometimes the rabbi says something openly, and then I say the rabbi said that. And sometimes the rabbi didn't say that, but I'll say that's what the rabbi would hold. What would Rabbi Vada Yosef hold in this situation, right? So I would say Rabbi holds this, even though he never spoke about it, but based on something that he said or he did, I'm able to tell you that's what he holds. That's what the Gemara says also about the pits of the date. Rabbi Yehuda did not make a statement, you know what, that if you open up a date and you took out the pit and you ate the date, that the pit is nolad. He didn't say it openly, but rather it was inferred, or Rav understood. Where did Rav get it from? From something that, from a generalization, he was able to figure it out. The Rav Ochel Tamre. There was a story. Rav ate dates during the weekdays. Okay, he liked dates. Okay, dates is very nice, good food, right? V'shada kasha yada lebuchya. And he took what he did with the date. He took the pit of the date and he threw it in the oven to use as fuel. The pit, which is, by the way, an interesting idea. In life, you could use waste products of items not to throw it out. If you can use it, so he threw it into the oven as fuel. Amalei Rav Chiya. Rav Chiya says to him, Ba Pachte, son of Gedolim, meaning it's like maybe it's like an honor that he calls him son of Gedolim. Maybe it means that he comes from great background, great lineage. Ba Pachte. Let's see if anyone makes a comment over here. Okay. He said to him, Knegdo b'yom tov asor. What you just did on the weekdays, that you took the pit of the date, you threw into the oven, and you're using it as fuel, that you will not be able to do on Yom Tov.
So just to clarify, you can't take the pit and use it in the fire on Yom Tov, or is it that the pit was created or the glass broken on Yom Tov?
Right.
Which is it?
Right. It's the same. Both are true. If the glass broke on Yom Tov, or
You can't use it ever.
right, it's mukseh. Except because the glass we said is because you can move it because it's dangerous. Let's say a wooden goblet wooden utensil broke on Yom Tov.
Yeah.
Now you want to take the pieces of that wooden, and it's not dangerous. You want to use it for firewood. He says you can't use it for firewood. Why? It's a new entity.
On Yom Tov or even
On Yom Tov. After Yom Tov, I can do
Okay,
whatever I want.
so
It's not mukseh. I can handle it. I can handle no issue. Here, the issue is on Yom Tov. Certain food items I can't move. I can't move my phone on only in certain circumstances. You know what I'm saying? I can't move money. I can't move rocks. These are items, right? You're familiar with
but
the laws
the
of
nolad is only the items that transform on Yom Tov.
correct.
Okay.
If it would have broke before Yom Tov, then I could use the wood on Yom Tov. I mean, if I would have
Okay.
ate the date before Yom Tov, so now it's wood. I could use it on Yom Tov
Okay.
because it was prepared before it was in that state.
And you
It's only because it changed on the Yom Tov.
and you can eat the date on Yom Tov and then on Monday throw it in the fire.
Correct.
Save it. Okay, I get it. It's just all of it. That makes sense.
All of it.
Timing.
Because it was timing, right? Because it was a change on Yom Tov. When Yom Tov started, this was a date,
Right.
and now in the middle of Yom Tov, it changed. It's no longer a date. It's a pit.
You wait until it's no longer.
Exactly. Thank you for bringing up
Because,
that. And we wish Simon a beautiful, beautiful
Thank
trip.
Which city is that? Oh,
And he's going to have Hashem should protect him. He should be very safe, very successful. We look forward when he comes back.
that's the best city that they say.
Huh?
And we
That's
should
the
join him
Valley
in
City.
join
right?
him.
Yes.
The Holy
Yeah.
Land. All the best, everybody. Take care, Ralph. Back
Have a
tomorrow.
good day. Bye-bye.
Ralph and Asaf. All right. Back tomorrow. Adam, maybe we'll send
Yes.
that back regular time.
6